Record button. All right, so we're going to show you a couple of new things today that you haven't learned. Mainly, we're going to go over cylinders again. We're going to make a cylinder, and then we're going to make it and practice forming it into a cup, right? And then there's a couple steps at the end, which will be new, where we are showing you what we need to do to get it off the wheel in order to keep it, right? So here we go. So I slap it down just like normal, and I have my water here. The new thing that we're going to do today is we're going to use this chamois. So you see this chamois here, I'm going to drop it into the water because like chamois, when it dries, it gets all stiff and gross and hard. So I have to put it in the water to get it happy and wet. Can someone get me one of those wooden planks from over there? All right, so here we go. So this is something we've all seen before. We're centering. So you can see why I wear my hat sometimes, because you see when I got really self-conscious about I just think it's really ugly to see someone's top of their head, right? And so that's not part of the video. So I started wearing the hat because I had to figure out a solution during COVID for the videos I was making. Because every once in a while, right, you have to be hunkered over the wheel, right? It's just better. And then I have to train myself to sit more straight up, but every once in a while. So this is still centering. So you notice I'm not really talking as much about what I'm doing here because you guys should be starting to get it. That makes sense? From the basic centering. You see what I'm doing. You see that I'm pushing it back down. What I really love about wheel work is it kind of looks like the clay is alive, like it's this amorphous like thing, like this blob, like, right? It's really cool watching somebody throw. All right, so centered, right? So I wedged it up really good. And now I got to think about I'm starting to think about what kind of cup do I want to make? Do I want to make a wide cup? Do I want to make a tall, narrow cup? That's the first thing, because the width of this mound determines the width of my cylinder and my cup, right? That I cannot make it from this mound. It's very difficult for me to make a really wide cup that's out here where the walls come up from there. So think about that. And then what I do is then I flatten out the top. So I feel like this is okay. I'm starting with about 2 pounds of clay. If you're at the point where you're thinking you want to keep something, or you felt like you could have kept something along the way, then you may want to switch to your new clay, your fresh bag clay, rather than using reclaimed clay, right? But I have set out more reclaimed clay for you guys, or have reclaimed clay out there for you guys to use until you guys get to that point, right? Because that makes sense. Yes, a question, go. You actually see a lot of clay. Yeah, so when you're going down, that means your middle finger probably isn't in the middle, or you're digging too much in. I think when I watch you, you're digging too much in with this finger. So the question was, there's lots of clay coming out from up, right? I saw that. This middle finger is probably digging too much into this wall, I think what it was. So relax that, because I could really do this with one finger going down. Right, so I could really do that with one finger, and that other finger is not doing anything, but these other 2 fingers are kind of along for the ride, kind of reinforcing. So you kind of got to cheat these fingers up a little bit, and that middle finger comes down, like, you see that? So that the wall of the thing is like that, right? If you have them flat, then the wall ends up trying to go flat, and it doesn't want to do that. It wants to be this little round thing. So you see how this finger is down more, these 2 fingers are up higher. And then I push them together to reinforce, and they act together. That makes sense. So try that and see. So then I'm going to check my depth. So this, I know that we've been talking about depth before, right? We are going to trim a foot. Oops, sorry. We are going to trim a foot on here. You see that? So we need extra clay at the bottom in order to trim this and not have trimmed the hole through our bottom of our thing. Pinky width thickness is about right, because that will eat up about half of that thickness. You guys see that? So that I have about a half a pinky's width thickness before I get to the other side of that, and then this foot is about half a pinky width thickness. You guys understand? If you guys want a massive chunky foot like this, like see how chunky that is? That's like a whole pinky width thickness. So then you would need at least another half pinky width thickness for the wall thickness of that. That makes sense to everybody? And we'll talk about that next class. We are going to trim a foot onto every single cup because it is an important skill. So you can see here, this is my cup that I haven't trimmed yet, that I cut in half. And you can see I left a pinky width thickness. If I can move the right direction, right? You see I left a pinky width thickness there. And then you look, you see I drew a little diagram of the parts of the clay that I'm removing. You can see right there and right there are the parts of the foot that I'm leaving behind to create that guy there. And we'll talk more about that next class. Does that make sense to everybody about trimming next class? Okay, so we're back to this. So here I got to check my thickness. This is critical because if I go too thin, I don't get to trim a foot, right? And part of the class is we got to learn how to trim feet. So I do my normal stab down. We've seen this before. We pull it out. Oh, way too thick, right? So this thickness there would be good for that other cup, right? That I showed you with a big foot. That's a lot of trimming, and that's like I could. But let's go down a little bit more. So I just keep going, and let me check again. Okay, getting closer, still just a little bit thick. I'll go down a little bit more. So you see, you can go down in steps. It's better to be thick and then work your way down, right? If you don't feel like you have it. Oh, we're right there. So we're good now. You see that thickness is correct. So we're good. I'm happy. So then I'm just going to pull straight back. So you notice that this is the same. These are all the same moves that we did before. Right? So one new move I think we talked about a little bit is when I look at this, I want to smooth this out because you want to make sure the inside bottom of your cup is nice and smooth, usually, right? Or not have jaggedy, pokey things, right? Because any surface, it's just easier to clean off a smooth surface, right? Your sponge just goes around on it easier. So how do we do that? So we take our right hand and take our 3 fingers and make them flat. You see how I had to do that? And it's because my middle finger is longer, it has to be like that. So everybody do that. Take your right hand and push it against something flat, like another finger or something. And then you take your sponge and then you go like that. So like that. You see that? Bloop. With my sponge, make sure it's wet. And then what I'm going to do is take these 3 fingers and just push down on this side of the clay, the side of the clay that's spinning away, right? So just go bloop like that. And then what you'll do is you're on the side of the clay that's spinning away, and I just kind of walk it back and forth. And the sponge, right? If I just did this with my 3 fingers bare, like that, I would have 3 lines, like 1, 2, 3, right? Because the fingertips, the sponge helps dampen that and helps make it more smooth, the force, right? The contact point. And I just kind of just move it back and forth just a little bit, staying on that side. So here, you kind of don't see it because it's not a big space really, right? For me to really, but if I had a much bigger space, I would spend some time walking that back and forth if it was a much bigger piece. All right, so you see how smooth that bottom is? We're happy now. And then we do the raising. So here we go. So that was something new that we hadn't talked about yet. We talked about this. I'll compress this in a little bit because that is like that. And then we'll do a raise up, make my cylinder. So the better the cylinder, the better the cup, right? So I raise, doing that, normal. Let's go to that view because it's more fun, right? And you can see both my inside hand like this. Remember how the hand position works. Interesting, I'm doing the cross finger version, pushing up, pushing down, like that, and I'm pushing like that, and I'm going up. We want an even, nice even cylinder, going up. There we go, and then I let go. Remember, the top half of the cylinder takes less force, right? The bottom part of the clay, you have to, in general, I have to push harder to get that clay to move, and then I go up, and as I'm going up, I'm slowly releasing the pressure. All right, so remember that also if your cylinder is flaring out prematurely, like it's not a cylinder, it's getting bull, we could do this, right? And if it's always happening, make sure that you're pushing more from the outside, going inward, right, toward the center, right? Like try to lift toward the center. Right, all right, so I think this is looking pretty good, right? And so we have some height and width requirements. I think this will work for that. So I think for this guy, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna make an hourglass shape. So one other step is we wanna clean out the water from the inside. So here I'm looking at the inside, I'll take my sponge. So let's just pretend from the process there's lots of water in there, it was pretty dry. we want to clean out the water from the inside, because that water will be soaking, will make that clay really soft if we leave it in there for forever, and that will promote cracking on the bottom. So I take my sponge, squeeze it out, and then I'll just drop it in there to swab out the water, and then I squeeze it out into my bucket, and I might have to do that multiple times, right, to get that. Now, this is an optional step where I will take my 2 ribs like this. So I picked up 2 ribs, and I will just clean off the outside by ribbing the inside and outside. One thing you'll notice is that the outside rib, which is this one, won't be straight up and down, will be turned a little bit. And I'll explain why in a second. So I'll start from the inside of the cylinder while it's spinning, go woo, like that. That makes sense? You'll see it here in a second. Let me explain why it's turned. So when you look at the ribs, I could just press it flat, right? Let's go side for a second. I could just press it flat, but this cylinder, this is a flat side, right? Your cylinder, unless you're awesome, like incredibly awesome, won't be perfectly flat straight. So if I'm holding this straight up and down and flat, it's only going to be contacting one place or another. And that will mean that it'll be doing a good job in that spot, but a horrible job in the place where it isn't touching. That makes sense? So in order to make sure it's touching in the best spot possible, one, I could just flip this guy around and use 2 curved sides, right? Because then it's always just going to be touching on the part that I want. Or check this out, when I go to top down, you'll see it, I can rotate, let's do it on this guy here so you can see it closer, right? Or I can rotate this. I'm going to really overemphasize it. I'm going to rotate it way more than I should, right? I can rotate it, and you can see when you rotate it just a little bit, it's only going to touch in the middle, right? And the cylinder then falls away really gently away on the top and the bottom. So it's like this beautiful smoothing out rib, and it works great. Once again, left hand on the inside, right hand on the outside. This outside rib is turned a little bit, not that much, but you'll see it. And then let's watch it from the side now. Let's get a close-up as close as we can with this. As close as we can so that you can see. And then let's pick that up. All right, so here, I'll do it here. You'll see me rotate it. Let's do it over here maybe. You'll see it. No, my hands, I'm going to do it way awkward. Right, like that. You can see the goopiness coming up, and they're working opposite each other. And you see, why am I doing this? Well, one, it creates a smooth cylinder. 2, it gets all this goopiness off from the inside outside. Remember, I'm working, so I just scrape this off onto one rib, and I'll scrape now off into my thing. And you see what it's doing is getting rid of the throwing lines and the goopiness. So I'll do it again. So let me do it from top down this time so you can see it. So this is rotated a little bit. You can see that they're opposite each other. This inside one is straight up and down because I use the curved side facing, right? Like this, and I curved here, and I start scraping like that. You see how going up, woo, there. And then you'll see that the cylinder ends up really smooth and happy. Why is that important? It's not that important actually structurally or anything. It's a thing, and it's an aesthetic choice, meaning that as a person, Don Wright said this, as the person making the pot, he wants to be the first one to make the line or the mark. As a conscious effort, as the artist, where if you leave throwing lines, it's just a sign of the process. That makes sense. So now if I want to, do sgraffito or mishima on here, right? Which we talked about a couple classes ago, where you're using underglaze colors. I have just created a beautiful smooth surface in order to do that, where the throwing lines will be disruptive to my patterning, right, that I'm creating. That makes sense? I created a beautiful blank canvas. All right. So now I have my thing. Let's make it into something, right? So this is pretty easy or fun. Not easy, fun, we'll say that. For example, let's say I want to make an hourglass shape. That means that I probably just I could use this part of the rib and just push this inward like that. You see how I'm just pushing that in, and because I want an hourglass shape, I spend more time in the middle to push it, to compress it in, right? Now, if I really knew that I really wanted an hourglass shape, I could have probably, maybe, this would have done a lot of the smoothing for me, right? So I might have been able to skip some of the ribbing that I did earlier, right? You see how, right? You see how this does a really good job, right, of creating that shape, because the curve here of this is already so beautiful. We have different size ribs. So we have ribs that are a little bit wider, bigger, and we have some that are a little bit smaller. So if this were a shorter cup, that I couldn't use a rib this big. Like if it was like that tall, I probably would try to find a shorter one. And then you see how I use that rib to create, you see how the rib shape kind of matches up with the curve I'm getting. That makes sense? So that's what these are for, because the curve is already so beautiful that I could use that like that. If you look from the top-down view, I'm using my right hand. I'm working on the side of the clay that's spinning away from me always, right? So once I feel like I have a beautiful shape, I'm like, woohoo, that's looking good, right? Then what do I do? Because so a lot of times our rims are all janky, right? Or have a tall spot, let's just say, right? Have a tall thing, something going around. How do we fix that? Because we've had that happen, right? So how do we fix this, right? And this next step, practice on every single cylinder you make today, the next couple things I show you, because you don't want to be your first one to be the one you mess up, right? Because this takes a little bit of time to get comfortable. So what we do here is get our needle tool, hold it like a pencil, right? So everybody knows how to hold a pencil like that, but usually knuckles are kind of facing upward when we hold a pencil. We want to hold this, so everyone get out their needle tool, hold it like a pencil, right? Like that. And then, or get out a pencil and hold it like a pencil or a pen. And then what we're gonna do for this though, is we're gonna flip it like that. So my palm and fingers are pointing up toward the sky, right? So as if my palm are like that, and then we're gonna hold this like a pencil like that. Knuckles are pointing down, basically. Then what are we gonna do is, the reason why you can actually hold it like anything like you want. The issue is, if I hold it like this, I'm just not used to using a, like that's a power tool. Like if I want to take this needle tool and like stab it into somebody or stab something like the ham and see, right, you got to penetrate with that thing, the probe to make sure it's the right temperature. This, we need delicate, we need dexterity for this. So this, we hold it like a pencil, and then we want to get down here, and then what we're going to do is trim off some clay by taking that tip of that needle tool and holding it. So you see, I brace my other hand, so I push up like that against my other hand like that, right? And then I'll bring this in, and I will take this needle tool. I need to be steady, and I want to take this and slowly score a line along the surface. And then each time I go around, I stay in that line and I cut all the way through to the other very slowly. It may take 5 or 6 rotations, 10 rotations before I go through. So let's do it without that piece in the way. So pretend there is still a piece of clay above this. Hold it like a pencil. I brace up with my other hand. So it's better if people are doing this, watch the simulation, right? If you have your pencil. And then I kind of put my middle finger here riding along the inside, and then I touch it to the clay, and then I slowly insert it over several revolutions, lots of revolutions, right? 10 until it comes out the other side. All right, so now I've created a flat rim, right? It doesn't matter what it was before, now it's beautiful and flat. I want to wet this down because, oh, that's a really sharp rim, right? You want to create a nice, beautiful round rim. So everybody look at your neighbor and look at their mouth, right? Look at your mouth. It's like this beautiful round thing. And if your hands are clean, feel your lips. Like, I know you've done it. It is a really soft and fleshy place, right? It doesn't like sharp objects, right? It doesn't like pokey things, right? And you look around, just look around where you are. How many things would you stick in your mouth here, right? As the maker, this is going to be in your house. People are going to trust you, right? I don't know what happened. Oh, this one, right? The only reason why I'm okay sticking this thing in my mouth is because it's a cup. If this was a plate, I'm not sticking that in my mouth. If this was a pencil just lying on the table, I'm not sticking that. But I'm very comfortable just reaching into my cabinet. I don't know where it was yesterday or what it did. I don't know if my kids had it in the bathroom or scooping water out of the toilet or something. There's a trust level there as the person making it that you have to deliver for the person that's using it, right? So what are we going to do with that? Meaning that we have to make this round, because our lips are very soft. If they're pokey or something, they're gonna get cut or damaged, and then they'll go, no one's gonna use your cup because they don't know why, but they don't like interfacing with it, because you're gonna kiss it like this. Right, you are kissing a cup, right? So you as a person has to deliver, right, on that obligation. You are not, and especially if you're giving it to a friend, right? You don't want them to cut themselves later. That would be horrible. So this, when I cut this, it kind of looks like the top of like a pipe or something, right, that you cut off. And it has two sharp edges that are like 90-degree angly things. So I wet it down with a sponge. So I just cut it, I wet it down, and see, just wetting it down really helps out, right? Softens it. But what we want is another something that looks like a lip. Right, your lips are this rounded thing, right? And then, like when you kiss somebody, you're kissing another rounded thing, right? You're never gonna think about how you interact with your cups the same again. You thought the handle thing was important. This is even more important, right? So then I get my chamois. You remember the chamois? And it's on the thing. It's over there. I will flip it up. So I guess we got to back off for this so you can see that, right? So I take my two fingers and I pinch it like that, but then I flip it up so it has like a little upward U, right? And then we'll bring it closer. Then what do we do with the upward U? Is let's get this in the right spot so you guys can see it. Then I take this upward U like that, and I just plop it over that, and I just put a little bit of pressure down and a little bit of pressure in from the sides. You see that? And I go bloop like that, and I just let it run around. Let the wheel and time do the work. Oh, you see that, how it becomes that nice rounded happy place, right? Now, there's lots of reasons. This is a thing that just makes the cups in general easy to use. You could have a completely different attitude about cups. Like you could put spikes on there or something, right? It's up to you. Like your grade doesn't matter about functionality, right? About is it usable? It's okay if that's your attitude or whatever, do something else, right? I'm fine with that. But in general, we like this rounded and a happy, so when people drink out of it, it's not an issue, right? All right, so I rounded it off. Look how happy that is. And then I'm already thinking about whether it's gonna need a handle or not. I'm thinking maybe not, maybe, I don't know. Like I'm just test touching. All right, a couple other things we gotta do. This is gonna be a little tricky too, right? So I'm gonna take my clay knife right there, you see that? And then when I'm going to hold it like a pencil as well, this time knuckles up, right? And then I'm going to take the very tip and draw a line on the surface of the clay. See, I'm coming in at an angle, woohoo, like that. You see that? And then I just keep plunging it down at that angle. See that? Until I hear it grinding against the wheel. I stay in the same path, right? One thing you don't want to do is if you turn it like that direction, woo, it's going to cut into your pot. If you turn it in this direction while it's doing that, it's going to kick out of your pot. You guys see that? For all sorts of reasons. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy, and you can see kind of both angles. I'm going to cut this. Oh, you can see that now this piece of clay, let's stick it in there. My pot and then this piece of clay are two actually separate pieces of clay. If the lighting was better, you'd be able to see you'd be able to see the brownness of the bat in that ring. All right, so there are two pieces of clay surrounding each other. And then what I'm gonna do is take this guy here, let's get this over a little bit so it's a little bit better, right? I'm gonna cut this, bloop, like that. So I just used the tip of that to cut it. You can see it there, right? So I created a cut, so I cut that ring in half, or create a cut. Then I'm gonna hold this like that and hold that steady as the wheel spins. So that little bit of clay is gonna hit this clay knife and get kicked out away from the pot, right? So let's do that. I have to hold this steady. Well, oop, didn't do a good job. So it's a little bit like the way a snow plow works. Right, a snow plow has a blade that's angled toward the side of the road, so the snow gets pushed off to the side. This is angled like that, so when that clay hits it, let's go to the side view, right? You see, watch like this now. I'm trying to get out of the way of the camera. You see how that chunk of clay goes off, right? If I do it straight, the clay will just get all traffic jammed and get a big blob and cut. And if I do it like this, right, the clay will end up getting pushed back into my pot. Generally not what we want to do. All right, so new thing, cut off the rim. I undid that, and then one new thing, how do we get it off the pot? This is my best thing ever. I've never made anything better before, right? And I need to keep this. Did I get a board? So this is the trick. Can someone get me did you give me a board? Oh, there it is. Good, I see it. So this is the trick. How do we get this off the clay? Thank you. So we get a board, and I hold this tight. I slap it down against the wheel, so I'm holding my wire tool tight, and then while the wheel's slowly turning, I drag it under. If you're a little bit unsure if that really worked, or I'm not confident about what just happened, or if it's whatever, I'll do it again. If I'm really nervous, I could do it twice. Doesn't matter, right? And then, so now this is off. I cannot do more things. So the minute I touch this, it's just gonna fall over, right? One technique I'm gonna show, oh, we're not going to show those. I forgot. We are just going to do the magic lift thing. So your hands may be wet. So I just wet down my hands. I cannot have wet hands for this next part. So I'm going to towel off my hands, right? Make sure they're dry-ish. It doesn't have to be completely dry. And then I'm just going to take my hands and lightly touch the outside. So let's put this camera back up, away up here, because you'll see it. So I lightly touch the outside of the pot like this. It may require a little bit of a twist as you lift, right? Oh, don't block, John, right? So I twist, so now it comes off. And you can see that the pot shouldn't deform that much when you do this, and then I put it on my board. So that was pot number one. That took a long time because there was a lot of stopping and talking. Let's do another one, except, yes, go ahead. What's that? No, I just dragged it through as the wheel was turning. I'll show you. So there was a question about, was I twisting the wire? I just placed the wire down here, and as the wheel was turning, I just dragged it straight through. Why do we have the wheel turning while it drags? Why don't we just do it straight? You can, but if you just drag it straight or drag it without turning wheel, the wire does these interesting things. It kind of bulges up as it's traveling through the middle, and then it kind of drops back down. So you end up leaving more clay here in the middle, and you get an asymmetrical cut. If you cut it while spinning, you see how you cut the outside, the whole outside first, and then you get to that level, and then when you get to the middle, the whole thing is cut through, right? And so it actually gives you a more symmetrical cut, rather than this way. If you cut straight through, this direction, this side and this side are different than this side and this side. That makes sense. So that's why we spin slowly while we're cutting. So let me do another one really fast, and we're gonna make you one more like this, right, that has a belly a little bit. So this one will go faster. Less John Hasegawa explaining what's going on, because we've seen it already, right? So here, center. Oh, I should reorient this down a little bit. There we go, like that, something like that. All right, so this will have less explanation, centering, right? I'm already thinking, ideally, you're already thinking a little bit about what you want to make. You notice that I cut some clay off. So this is going to be less than 2 pounds of clay, right? Here we go, and I'm centering, and I'll push down. I'm trying to make this one go a little bit faster so we can get to making. Actually, I'm not centered yet, so we'll go back to centering again. This clay, okay, here we go. So we'll make a slightly smaller one. We'll make it one that has like a slight belly, right? Here we go, down. Oh, so let's watch carefully, right? Because I remember this came up as a question, right, on the last one, right? So before I start, I cock my hands over, right? These fingers initially aren't gonna really, these two outside fingers, the three are not really gonna touch the clay at first, right? Because they're up a little bit, and I start the hole, right? And then everything starts coming into contact, right? You guys see that? And then let's go top down there, right? You see that, how I'm slowly making that? I'll add a little bit more clay or water. So we'll move a little faster now, because I know you guys want to get to making. Moving fast is not the key, right? I try to move as slow as I can just blast through the stages, right? I check there. Oh, that's perfect this time. Oh, thank goodness, right? And then I'm going to open it up. I'm being really aggressive there. Then remember, what are we going to do with the bottom before we do anything else? Smooth it out, right? You see now why I can't smooth it out later. It's hard to smooth out later because I have a big tall cylinder in the way. Right now it's best to smooth out. Then I'll collapse that back sometimes, and then I'll do a raise. You watch when I'm doing everything, right? Because I'm not explaining like I'm adding water, right? I add water each time. Some people throw with a sponge in their hand like this, like hold a sponge above their fingertips so that when it gets dry, they squeeze water out. So we'll just do that once. Why don't I do that? Because actually I do think that is a very good way to throw. That's just not the way my instructor taught me. And so I don't feel that comfortable doing that, right? It's just not the way I learn. So I'm creating another generation of potters who throw without the sponge. Just like how my mentor taught me. Oh, look at that. Oh, such a good cylinder. You see that? Oh, that's so good. I'm so excited. This is going to be the best one ever, right? And then I will clean out the water on the bottom. And then what comes next? You guys remember? Because this is a new step. Remember, we haven't done this. We didn't do that step till today. This is optional. Yeah, we'll smooth it out. I think I heard someone say it. Smooth it out. So remember, outside rib is flat side, turned a little. Inside rib, you will use the curved side. And then it's light pressure. You don't have to be too aggressive, right? There, clay's coming off. I scrape that away. Woohoo! Do it one more time. All right, so now I have my beautiful cylinder, and then I'm going to create a belly here. Side view for this one. So I will create a belly here at the bottom. Let's get really low so you can see it this way. So what am I going to do? I'm going to create more that has a belly like a vase shape. So that means from here down will be have like a stomach or something, and then you can think about it. Is it like different kinds of bellies have different feelings? Like, what do I mean? Like, there is the younger dude who kind of let himself go a little bit, used to be an athlete, has a small belly, and then there's like the guy that's like 50 years old, right, has like 20 years of not eating well and stuff, and that's a different kind of belly. Or you can think about different people's belly, like pregnancy. A pregnant woman there's a shape there that's different than those other bellies I talked about, right? And there's an energy there. How do we explain it? It's difficult to explain, but I'm going to use my fingers here, and I'm thinking about how much belly I want. You can see where I'm pushing. I teach a way called stretching, where we don't really touch the outside again, right? As far as the bellying out. So you can see I could stop there, right? Think about what you want, right? How much belly you want, right? So this is a very slender, if you have to go back to people, right? This is a very slender person still, right? And then I could think about this, I could push it out more, right? And so that for me, as I'm thinking a lot about those, I don't know why I got stuck on that, right? But you could also think about fruit and vegetables, right? Because they have a form. There's lots of different things. Mechanical things, right? Have things, right? So you see how I'm pushing this out, and watch how it changes, right? You see how the earlier pot is something different. We can also use a rib for this, right? So we can take my rib, and I can use it. Instead of using my edge of my finger like this, I could take my rib and use like this part and push it out down below. And you can see how that helps out a lot. I actually would use a rib a lot. I just started with my fingers because that's what I had. And you can see now that belly is now something different. Ooh, what if I like that? I'm going to stop there, right? So I concentrated on the belly. Now I have to think about what to do here. Let's fix this. So the rim is actually more important as far as impact for how much work you need to do than the bottom part. Watch this. So right now that's something. I could stop there. Watch when I do this, just a little bit of a change. It will change how we feel about the pot, right? That is like how we end the sentence or the last thing, right? We can change this whole thing, how people feel about the whole pot, just by making a small adjustment. So I pushed it in. So what is this kind of looking like? It's like belly and then straight, right? Watch this. If I do this, I can constrict it. Oh my goodness, I can actually push it in a little. Oh my goodness, right? That is changing how people feel about it. Let's go back to the way it was though, something, right? So you notice I did the bottom and now I'm gonna do the rim. I could actually use a little bit of fingertip action to control that a little, right? So what am I thinking about? Maybe I'm thinking about, I just want a cup that does like this S thing, comes up and then does like a S curve back out, right? But maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want a break in the line. So you see S curve, let's do something where it definitely does something and then there's like a line or something and the curve like shifts. So you guys don't know what I'm talking about. I'm going to do it right now. So I'm spending some time and pushing, doing a change there. You see that? How I'm going to create a change in line. And some of you may be like, John, it looked better before, right? And to emphasize that change in line, I might push that out, right? You see how it just creates a zone where it's like a line where the form is shifting, right? So before the curve was kind of shifting around, like S-ing, like, and then I'm looking at the top. This top seems really narrow for the volume. What does that difference does that make? Well, that means that if you want to make a splash-proof cup, you ever seen those ones, those driving cups? They're just basically this like kind of thing like this, and they have a narrow opening. That's great because you can actually be a vigorous walker, and the coffee doesn't spill out, right? The opposite of that would be like a bowl. Right? If you had a bowl with a handle on, you try to drink coffee, if you do anything, tip it around, like all over, and you can't even drink out of it, right? Because it's like, right? Where the opposite is a wider bottom, a narrower top. The good thing about it is it's harder to spill, right? As you're moving around. The harder part is it's harder to get the last parts out. Like to get it out, you really have to tip it back really far. And so when you're driving, I had a driving cup for a little while because I'm John Hasegawa. I'm vigorous talker, vigorous walker. I had one, but you have to tip it back so far away up, like you're like upside down trying to drink water while you're driving. That doesn't work. So I don't like them. But I made this opening kind of small, so with the realization that it's a vigorous, right, it's harder to get the stuff out. Let's just cut this rim off. So remember, hold it like a pencil, push up, fingers like that, compensate from the inside, like that. Like that. I slice the top off. Let's just show you one other way to do the same thing. So this is the other way. I hold the wire really taut like this over a small space, right? So you can see in that one, I'm holding it really taut like that. And I just got to hurry up, boom, and get down to a level and hold it for at least one revolution. This is tricky too. Here we go. And then, boop, right? So that's the other way you could do that, right? It's faster, but you can mess it up faster, right? Does that make sense? It happens so quick. All right. So the next thing, remember what the next thing is? Yeah, so we have to round it off, right? So first I have to wet it, though, because the chamois don't like the dry surface, and then chamois it up, right? Oh, I had to do those cuts, right? And you see that it doesn't look that good anymore. So proportion counts. So maybe I need to do some changes here to make this work, right? Because you see this top part just seems way wimpy compared to how bold that bottom is. For me, I can't handle it. So I'm going to cheat down here. I'm going to grab some clay from down there really fast. I'm going to grab a little bit more clay and trying to make this work somehow. Oh, look, see how that's, at least it's getting better, right? Right, I liked it much better before, right? But all the cutting kind of made it, but I'm going to keep this. Why? Because I did all that work on it, and we're going to keep it. All right, so then undercutting, right? So remember the undercutting. Now this, because this is bulgy out so far, I can be more aggressive with an undercut, but you don't have to be. So hold it like a pencil, remember? Use the tip of the blade, draw a line, go in, stay in that line all the way down, right? And you can hear it grinding against the wheel. So now this piece of clay and that piece of clay are different, right? Are separate. And then I want to push this down like this, plop it in like that. Let's go above because you can't see it. And then I want to make sure this thing is away, like turning. So when it spins, it cuts that chunk of clay away from me right there. And I'll do it again. All right, so remember that you can use your new clay if you feel like you're verging on keeping stuff, right? You will feel a difference, meaning the new bag clay is better than the reclaimed clay, right? And I dry off my hands, right? I cut it off, I dry off my hands, right? So let's get this board so you guys can see it again, the whole process. And then I want to dry hands, and then I just touch it as much surface area contact with my hands as possible, and I lift like that, and you can see I'm able to lift it off without collapsing it, gentle, right? And then I pop it on my board. So what happens with these? I'm going to dry them out so they're leather hard for next time, and then we'll trim them next time and make a handle and put them on, right? It is okay if you don't make any cups today, if you just spend the whole rest of the time just trying to sort out throwing. And once again, it's important that you spend a lot of every class throwing. That makes sense? As we move along, in general, the lessons will get, the initial throwing part, opening parts will get faster, right? You saw that, how I went faster. And what we'll focus more on is the stuff you actually need to know, but because you'll get better at centering, better at everything, the steps that come before. But we always add on stuff to the end, right? So today we learned trimming the rim, rounding the rim, and undercutting, right? That makes sense? Those are the three things we knew. I should have showed you trimming the rim and undercutting last class, but I didn't get around to the second demo because you guys were all like, woohoo, going like crazy. All right, any questions?